Coming to you live from $1 Million Studios, it's your boys, Chris Speez,
a.k.a. Chris Spizzle,
and the benchmark of professional wrestling, Mr. Silky Baines,
a.k.a. the guy your girl wants to be with.
Speez and Benchmark show on a Thursday night, July 12th, 2018. Glad to have you with us. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and share the program, like the program, all that good stuff that we ask that you do to help get the word out about the Speez and the Benchmark show. We would greatly appreciate that.
Because these bills need to get paid.
Indeed they do, and it is good to see you, sir. You guys might hear some thunder and lightning going on in the back. Well, you won't hear the lightning, obviously, but might hear some thunder going in the background because it's raining balls here in Houston.
Yeah, it really is. And, I mean, it's actually an effect because, you know, we have $1 Million Studio, so $1 Million Studio, you wouldn't hear that, but we have some effects going on and enzymes and shit.
This is true. That's right. I forgot all about that. It's actually we're testing some new things here. Is what we're doing.
That's what we're
testing
doing.
Some brand new sound effects that we have going on for the show, like our Ric Flair woo. Yeah, we got that going on, and all kinds of great stuff. So thank you guys.
And don't forget
for being with us.
Negro music.
Yes, the Negro music, which we always have standing by in case Silky decides to drop some knowledge on us, as the case may be. So thank you guys for being with us. It's always a joy to have you. We enjoy talking wrestling with you. And we're going to talk a little G1 Climax today. That kicks off this weekend, as does Extreme Rules on Sunday afternoon. But before we get to that, we are going to let Silky tell you about where he is going to be in action this Sunday.
This Sunday, I will be in action at the Katy Elks Lodge for Domination Zone Wrestling. Big tag team main event. Me and Romeo Falcon against David Duperon, the current heavyweight champ, the guy who took my title. He kind of slithered into it, but whatever. And T-Ray, a guy that smashed me in the face with a chair. For what reasons, I don't know, but I'm very much looking forward to, punching him several times around the facial region.
Okay, yeah. Brooke says it's nice and hot here in St. Louis. That's good. But, it's raining here in Houston. Yep. But we deal with it because that's what we do. Once again, Speez and the Benchmark Show. Chris Speez, Silky Baines, happy to have you with us here on the show. And we're going to kick it off with Extreme Rules. Let's talk some Extreme Rules. WWE's big event this Sunday. One of the complaints I'm hearing from fans on the Twitters and...
Wait, you're hearing complaints from fans? Never.
Imagine that about WWE.
Never.
It does happen on occasion.
They would not do that.
One of the complaints I'm hearing about from the fans, I should say, not about the fans, is that there are not enough stipulation matches with this year's Extreme Rules. That we're not seeing the same types. Admittedly, it is a little less on the extreme factor. A little light on the extreme?
A little light. You got an Iron Man match, which that's extreme for a different reason. Then you have the Extreme Rules and a cage match. And I believe that is all.
Fair enough. Well, no, you've got so we said the Extreme Rules match, which is Alexa Bliss versus Nia Jax.
Yes.
You've got your 30-minute Iron Man match, let's not forget.
Yes, I mentioned that first. That was the first thing I mentioned.
Seth Rollins, Dolph Ziggler. You got your cage match with Strowman and Kevin Owens. And we've added the tables match. Oh, yeah, the tables match. SmackDown Live.
New Day and
Sanity in the pre-show, believe it or not.
Yeah. I do believe that.
Putting one of the better stipulation matches, I feel, on the pre-show.
I'm not a big fan of tables matches. Besides, they hurt. But
the difference between watching a tables match and actually being involved in a tables match.
But, from a watching standpoint, I don't like too much of the unpredictability because everyone knows the ghost is giving up and everyone knows it's a show and everything. So, that leaves it where that table breaks early before your go-home spot, it really jacks with the show. And, it's one of those things you can't control. It's just like First Blood matches. I love a First Blood match, like guy pouring down blood, whatever. But I've literally been on shows where there was a First Blood match, and in the first move of the match, the guy tatered him right in the nose, busted his nose. He's bleeding.
You're screwed.
Match is over,
Yeah.
It's that uncontrollability of what could happen.
That's true.
You put a guy on the table and the table breaks, you put him through the table, the match is over.
That's true. I do like the fact that the overwhelming majority of the belts are being defended on this show. It's nice to see. It's nice to see them being defended. Now you can make the argument, as you did the other day, and I don't want to steal your thunder here.
But you're going to do it anyway.
that we do see that on another WWE pay-per-view.
Yes, I mean, then what's the point of Clash of Champions? That's supposed to be the one night where all the titles are on the line. Now, granted, since Lesnar's not there, technically all of them aren't on the line, but enough of them are.
Yeah, that's true. And we don't know when Lesnar's going to be back. That's one of those things that we're just going to have to deal with.
But
as we've been
if you'd like to, pretty soon, you can check out our channel and listen to Silky Books as I take a foray in my stab at taking the title off Brock Lesnar.
This is true.
It is great.
Couple of video series that we're starting here. First of all, last week you may have seen our sound effects guys going to work there. Our tech guys doing their thing.
I'm gonna fire you.
Yeah. Keep it down, fellas. We got a live show going on here. $1 Million Studios.
Jesus Christ.
I know some of these guys. We started last week with the everything you need to know about SmackDown Live in under 3 minutes.
Which was a great video.
I appreciate that very much. That is up on our YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/Speez benchmark. If you are listening to us on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, wherever you happen to be listening to the podcast on Friday or beyond, make sure you head over to that YouTube channel. We got some great content coming up there. So we've got the everything you need to know about SmackDown Live in under 3 minutes. Now, I missed this week's episode because we're upgrading some equipment here. Camera's in flux, so the new camera is on the way. It will be here tomorrow. So apologies for that one not being up this week. And we are starting a brand new series, as Silky just mentioned, Silky Books. And it is going to be Silky Baines here, booking several different wrestlers. They could be current wrestlers. They could be former wrestlers. But since Silky is actually a booker with Domination Zone Wrestling here in Katy, Texas, we figured a great segment would be a guy who actually books wrestling. How would he fantasy book certain wrestling things?
And just there's a few things like I'm not going back and just changing shit. Most of this stuff I'm doing from where they are at the current moment or where they were at that current moment. So it's not like
fellas, again with the
Jesus
lightning
Christ.
sound effects.
I will fucking fire you. Anyway,
jeez.
It's not going to be just go back and change. Like I never would have had Goldberg or Brock Lesnar win a title at Mania.
Yeah, you can't do that.
No,
we're not going back
because there's videos that do that, and that's all well and dandy. It's easy to go and basically erase history and make your own. It's a lot more difficult to start with the chips you're given, and that's what booking a show is. A lot of times you have to roll with the chips you're given.
That's exactly right. So the first episode of Silky Books will be Silky Books, the Universal title. We will talk about, or he will talk about, I should say, how we can get the Universal title back into circulation on Monday Night Raw and start building some rivalries around that title.
It is amazing, and that's all I will say about that.
It will be up very soon, so we're looking forward to that. Okay, back to Extreme Rules. So, obviously, with Brock Lesnar not being on the card, the WWE Championship takes the center stage. As far as the most prestigious belt being defended on the show. Don't know whether or not it will actually main event the show.
It won't main event the show. Negro Diamonds music.
No, it's coming. Here we go.
Lashley and Reigns will main event this show.
Have they officially said that already, or is this?
Well, I mean, I think it was Corey Graves when they got in that big pull-apart brawl thing on Raw.
Right. He
did mention something about Kurt Angle's wanting to protect his main event.
Fair enough. Kind of let the cat out of the bag there, perhaps.
A little, perhaps, but just knowing the way WWE's been booking, and this is actually something I'm actually interested in seeing. So I wouldn't be mad if it main evented because, I mean, we've talked about how we hated what they did with Lashley, putting him with Zayn and stuff like that. It did nothing for him. This is something that's going to do something for Lashley. Whether he wins or loses, I think he comes out of this looking great. Yeah.
And Brooke says, people need to stop complaining, or I should say, she says, if they're complaining, they need to stop watching. And, it's just one of those things about wrestling fans. They watch and they complain. It's sort of what they do. And Brooke does not like my shirt. Those of you listening to us on the podcast, I am wearing my prize fighter Kevin Owens shirt because I am a Kevin Owens fan. I love Kevin Owens. I love everything Kevin Owens does. He's great. He's a heel, and I'm not supposed to like him, and he is a jerk, as he's supposed to be on occasion. But I think he does his job very well. I think Lashley and Reigns being the main event is starting to get talked about on some of the dirt sheets, in case you haven't noticed. Silky and I don't like to read spoilers, don't like to read dirt sheet websites, things of that nature, because
it's all filled with their own agenda of what they like, and you got to cater to the masses.
Yeah,
and that's what people fail to see, is that you may not like what's going on, but you are not the only person. It's not like they sat there and said, Chris Speez, I am aiming this show at you.
Yeah, it doesn't happen that way. And, that's what we talked about when we've talked about how fans hijack certain matches that they don't like. Hopefully that won't happen with Reigns and Lashley this weekend. But I think there are grumblings within the internet wrestling community or the internet wrestling cesspool, as I like to call it, the IWC, that match will main event, but we'll see. But, back to the WWE Championship, you got AJ Styles and Rusev. Silky made the bold prediction on Monday's show, for those of you who were not with us, that
Rusev will win the WWE Championship, and he will win it on what day? Rusev Day.
Of course. I don't see it. I disagree. I think AJ Styles keeps it.
Jesus Christ,
fellas, go have a Red Bull or something, okay? Yes. Yeah, just listen.
Eat a Snickers.
It's great. Yeah, I love the new speakers. They sound great. It's obviously very expensive here at $1 Million Studios, but yes. Let's take it easy. I think Rusev winning that match, and I don't necessarily like to look at things from this perspective all the time, but in this regard, since it is very recent, I think that makes Shinsuke Nakamura look extremely bad.
Not really.
Because Shinsuke Nakamura has had 5 matches against AJ Styles.
I mean, are we doing the ABC booking of
and he hasn't beaten him?
Shinsuke beat Rusev, therefore if Rusev beats AJ, No,
I'm not saying that. I'm saying if Shinsuke can't beat AJ in 5 opportunities and Rusev beats him on his first shot, it kind of makes him look bad. Now, I'm not going to...
It doesn't. It absolutely does not.
To me, it does. To me, it makes him look bad.
Well, you're wrong. You're 100% wrong because, it's a competitive sport. So any day, someone could have a bad day.
This is true.
He may have been on his game with Shinsuke, and those matches took a toll. So that you could also play that into a factor. I mean, they were... After the WrestleMania match, they had the no DQ, they had the last man standing. Those matches take a toll on you, and it could be just right place, right time for Rusev.
It could be.
So, I mean, but Rusev
or it could
winning,
be that you're making Shinsuke Nakamura look extremely bad. And,
you're not.
But that's because people said that about how when Roman Reigns beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania, that Brock Lesnar's win all of a sudden meant nothing.
No.
Years had gone by. It's a completely different match. It's completely different. It's not nearly the same thing.
I mean, that's a bad example just because of Brock Lesnar's win was the first one.
No, I agree.
So there is no way to minimize the impact of that. Now, if you go into something, that's like saying, I can't even think of something because it's nothing that really relates to it. It's apples and fucking oranges. I mean,
it's true.
These are two different guys. These are 2 different matches. Just because AJ, if anything, it puts Rusev, it elevates Rusev.
Yeah, you would think so. And here's the thing. Look, I'm not going to say that they're not going to let Rusev win that match because of Nakamura. It doesn't work that way behind the scenes. I'm 99% sure. So I don't think that's the case. Just in my opinion, I think that makes Nakamura look kind of shitty, number one. In terms of why I don't think Rusev is going to win, again, this may just be wishful thinking on my part, but I view Rusev as one of those guys who doesn't really fall into a heel camp or a face camp. And part of that has to do with the fan reaction to him. For all intents and purposes, Rusev is supposed to be a heel. But the fans love him. The fans cheer for him the overwhelming majority of the time. The Rusev Day thing is its thing. Yeah. Silky's got to go. Look, when you go talk to these guys and tell them
these guys.
To
Jesus
keep it
Christ,
down,
people!
It's completely unbelievable. But with Rusev, I think he's one of these guys, and we've talked about it on our show quite often. The lines between face and heel have been blurred enormously in this day and age. You don't have outright faces. You don't have outright heels. You get a lot of what people like to call these tweener characters. These guys who are, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be heels, but they're super cool guys. And everybody wants to be the cool guy. Everybody wants to like the cool guy. Another one that comes to mind with me is a guy like Adam Cole. Undisputed Era, for all intents and purposes, is a heel faction. And if you look at what they do, they should be heels. I challenge you to watch an NXT TakeOver event. I challenge you to attend a live NXT event. I challenge you to watch any card where Adam Cole is a part of it and find me someone who gets a larger crowd reaction than Adam Cole. There's literally no one in NXT right now who is more over, as the fans like to say, than Adam Cole. They love him. They absolutely love him. And yet, for all intents and purposes, he is supposed to be a heel. And whether or not the modern fan likes to hear this or not, the truth of the matter is, wrestling for decades upon decades was built upon a very simple story. You got good guys and you got bad guys, and people paid a lot of money for a lot of years to come see the good guys kick the shit out of the bad guys. And the bad guys to get their comeuppance and get their asses kicked like they should. So it's one of those things. Did you talk to these guys? Have you gotten them squared away?
I did, but I've got to.
He's got to. All right, that's all right. You got to go take care of them. Go take care of them. Set them straight. The Silky Banes, the benchmark, I should say, is heading out for the evening.
Yes, the emergency has come up, and I got to go handle these people and make sure that they learn how to properly do their jobs.
Exactly.
So, till next time, signing off.
There he is. Silky Banes, everybody. But I see Rusev as another one of these guys. Now, he's not over with the fans to the level that Adam Cole is. But nonetheless, for whatever reason, Rusev Day has become a huge deal. It's become an enormously huge deal, and the fans absolutely love it. When the fans start cheering a guy that they're not supposed to like, it makes things challenging from a booking perspective. It makes things challenging from a storytelling perspective. It makes things challenging from a fan perspective, because if you are more of a casual fan, if you're not a hardcore fan, and you look at the things that Rusev is doing, which are supposed to be heel activities, and he's getting cheered at the end of the day, why is that happening? Why are they cheering this guy? Isn't he supposed to be a bad guy? It's one of those weird things that happens in wrestling today, and I don't really understand why it's as difficult as it is for us to see that these stories that we used to tell, the simple good versus bad, tend to be extremely good stories, extremely popular stories. They make a lot of money at the end of the day because people want to see the bad guy get his comeuppance. Let's take a look at the most popular storyline that's going on, arguably, in pro wrestling today. Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano. As soon as that started, as soon as Tommaso Ciampa turned on Johnny Gargano after DIY lost to the Authors of Pain at TakeOver Chicago last year, the whole wrestling world completely hated Tommaso Ciampa. Everybody turned on that guy in a hurry. There was nothing about Tommaso Ciampa's character that said, I want to be over with the fans. I want the fans to like me. I want the fans to cheer me. He did everything within his power to make people hate him, which is what the old school heels used to do. That's what we used to see heels doing. They didn't sell merch. You didn't see these guys out there signing autographs with fans and taking pictures with fans that would end up on Instagram. Of course, we didn't have Instagram back then, but you get the idea that I'm going for. It was very cut and dry. This is the good guy. This is the bad guy. And that story has worked brilliantly. And if you look at what has happened to those two guys in particular, their careers have skyrocketed as a result of this very simple rivalry. Good guy versus bad guy. Take a look at Gargano. He's main evented the last 3 NXT takeovers. He had the NXT title match against Andrade Cien Almas, and then the last 2 he's main evented against Tommaso Ciampa. 3 consecutive NXT takeover main events for him. Ciampa, of course, the last 2 main events as well, and now it looks like he's lining himself up to get a shot at Aleister Black for the NXT title again. Both of those guys, I would argue, have benefited so much from this rivalry, they would not, I would say, and again, this is one guy's opinion, but I would argue that neither of those guys would have reached the level of popularity that they enjoy right now had it not been for Tommaso Ciampa turning on Johnny Gargano and those two having a rivalry with each other. They were a great tag team. They were an entertaining tag team. I don't think had they beaten the Authors of Pain and won the NXT championships there in TakeOver Chicago, I don't think anybody would have batted an eyelash. I think they would have said it's totally believable because these guys are great. They've deserved it. They earned it. And we accept them as our champions. But instead, WWE in a lot of ways, and whether it's WWE pulling the strings, whether it's Triple H, NXT pulling the strings, somebody said, we're going to roll the dice and we're going to break these guys up and we're going to put them against each other. And what happened as a result? You got what is, in my opinion, the best storyline to happen in pro wrestling over the course of the last 12 plus months. Those two guys have absolutely knocked it out of the park. They've been spectacular. Their matches have been spectacular. The builds to their matches have been spectacular. Everything about what those guys have been doing has been absolutely great. And again, it all comes down to a very simple good versus bad storyline, and people eat that up. And I know it's not necessarily the coolest thing as far as the hardcore wrestling fans go. But look, you're not just selling to the hardcore wrestling fans if you're WWE. You can make that argument if you're New Japan, perhaps, at least over here in the States, but not with WWE. WWE has a much larger audience. They have a much more diverse audience. They have a much more diverse age range, I would argue. I don't think there's a whole ton of kids watching New Japan. There's probably way more watching WWE. Maybe there are a lot of kids watching New Japan, but you got to guess that there's more watching WWE. So those simpler storylines play easier to the more casual fan. And what are we always talking about? All the shows that are like this, all the wrestling podcasts out there, all the people who want to wax philosophical about what the WWE should do, it always comes back to how can you bring back the casual fan? If you look at the end of look at the mid to late 90s when we had the Monday Night Wars and it was WCW and WWF, the whole big concern about WCW starting up Monday Nitro and a live show opposite Monday Night Raw was that you were going to split that audience up, that there were only so many wrestling fans out there, and you were going to cut them in half, and half of them were going to go WWF, and half of them were going to go WCW. And it didn't work out that way. What happened is more and more fans came in. More and more people came and started watching. And you had the highest ratings that you've ever had in wrestling history. I mean, you've had certain shows, single shows like back in '88, the NBC show that WWF did with Hogan that did something like 30 million viewers. We're not going to see that again anytime soon. But Monday Night Raw is pulling what? Maybe 3.5 million viewers? 3.5 is probably a good number nowadays. Back in the Attitude Era days, they're pulling close to 10 million viewers, 9 million viewers, things like that. It's simple. It's in my opinion, simplicity works best in this industry. Give me a good guy, give me a bad guy. Let those two go at it. Let's see who comes out on top. So with that in mind, that's why I have trouble buying that Rusev comes away as the WWE champion. I think there's a fair amount of up in the air as far as what his character is and whether or not the crowd is going to respond to that character, that heel character, as you would expect a promotion or the fans of a promotion to react to a heel character. You can make the argument that that's perhaps why they hadn't put the title on Roman Reigns yet. He doesn't get the reaction that they want. How many times have they set him up to take that title away and let him have his moment where he's finally crowned the Universal Champion, and it hasn't happened? Maybe behind the scenes they feel like, it's not the time to do it. He certainly got enough chances, and it looks like he's going to get more. But I got AJ Styles. Silky's got Rusev coming up this weekend as far as the Universal Championship goes. I think both of us are most looking forward to the Iron Man match for the Intercontinental title between Dolph Ziggler and Seth Rollins. Now, you'll recall on Monday Night Raw this past week, we had Drew McIntyre win a one-on-one match against Seth Rollins to earn the right to be ringside for that match. So you got to think at some point some manner of shenanigans take place. Hopefully it doesn't ruin what will arguably be the match of the night. I think it's going to be match of the night. Silky said he thinks it's going to be match of the night. I think this is an underrated card from WWE. I think people saying that they're not really interested because the builds haven't been that great. Look, there's a lot of rock-solid matches on this card. I think Reigns and Lashley is going to be a good match. I think Ziggler and Rollins is going to be a great match. I think the New Day against Sanity on the pre-show is going to be a great match. You've got a lot of really good rock-solid matches set up for this card. And, if this card doesn't do it for you, and you've got Shinsuke Nakamura against Jeff Hardy, which I think is going to be a very good match. I mean, there's 4 or 5 matches on this that have the opportunity to be very, very good. If this card doesn't do it for you, maybe WWE's just not your thing. I mean, this is a pretty good card. There's a lot of good stuff going on. Now, there are certain guys that are missing. You know, we're not seeing The Miz, who's a guy that a lot of people want to see. We're not seeing Brock Lesnar, obviously. I think a lot of fans are used to that by now. But we're not seeing him. You've still got guys like Randy Orton out there. You've still got guys like Samoa Joe, like Dean Ambrose, who are missing from the roster now due to injuries and such. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you look at the roster as it's currently constructed, there's some pretty damn good matchups coming up this weekend. So hopefully WWE delivers and we get Extreme Rules to be a pretty good pay-per-view, a pretty doggone good pay-per-view. The other big event that kicks off this weekend is the G1 Climax over in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Their yearly tournament, 2 blocks of wrestlers. For those of you who are not familiar with how the G1 works, you've got a Block A, Block B. It is a round-robin tournament as far as the blocks go, where each wrestler will wrestle every other wrestler in his block. 2 wrestlers that have the best records out of Block A and Block B will meet in the final to crown the G1 champion. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the blocks for this year's G1 Climax. And before we get to that real quickly, Brooke might come back at SummerSlam. That's true. I'm assuming you're talking about Brock Lesnar, Brooke, but you could be wrong. There's plenty of guys that look to be fairly close to returning. Ambrose is one. You know, hopefully these guys get back sooner rather than later. Not too soon. Want them to take care of themselves, of course, but I would love to see those guys back in action. All right, on to the G1. We're going to take a look at Block A here. You have got Hiroshi Tanahashi, Togi Makabe, Michael Elgin, former IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kazuchika Okada, former U.S. Champion, the Switchblade, Jay White. You've got Yoshihashi, Minoru Suzuki, Evil, Hangman Page, and Bad Luck Fale. Now, when you look at this particular block, there's some really big name star power in there. You've got Okada, the longest reigning IWGP Heavyweight Champion prior to losing his title to Kenny Omega, obviously, at the end of their great feud that they had there. You've got Hiroshi Tanahashi, who is one of the most decorated champions in New Japan history, the Japanese John Cena, as several people will call him. And you got your Bullet Club members in there, obviously, because Bullet Club is going to be all over the place. But taking a look back here, Switchblade Jay White just recently dropped the U.S. Championship at the G1 Special in San Francisco. Michael Elgin, of course, was your never open weight champion until dropping that title very recently. And Minoru Suzuki, 50 years old, I believe now, and still going strong. That guy is great. Hangman Page, another guy that's been doing very well. I mean, it's a very good block. Now, Silky and I were talking about who our favorites were going into this whole thing, and honestly, one of the guys that I really like here is Jay White, and I'll tell you why. For those of you who did not watch the G1 special from San Francisco, from the Cow Palace this past weekend, it was an excellent show. It was very well done. Everybody did a great job. I thought the Juice Robinson versus Jay White match, in my opinion, was the match of the night. It was very well done. But one of the spots that went down in that match, and we talked about it in our show on Monday, was Jay White suplexing Juice Robinson into the metal railing that surrounds the ring, which shot back into the announce table, which shot back into Jim Ross, and knocked JR over backwards and injured his ribs from what we can tell. We don't know if this is a big kayfabe thing or if he's actually injured, legitimately injured. But this was a big deal, especially to Josh Barnett, who is JR's sidekick on commentary there, to the point where Barnett actually chased Jay White into the ring and then back out of the ring because he was pretty pissed off about how the whole situation went down. It drew an enormous amount of heat on Jay White. You had some people defending him. You had a lot of people against him, mostly because JR is just a treasure to those of us who have watched wrestling for a very long time. By all indications, this was not a planned spot. It was not something that JR saw coming. And so for them to have this happen, or for JR to have this happen to him, he was pretty pissed off about it, as was Josh Barnett. Point being, again, drawing that fine line between good guys and bad guys. I think Jay White is fantastic as a heel. I think what happened at the Cow Palace did so much to further establish him as an excellent heel. And I think Jay White has got to be looked at as one of the favorites coming out of the A block. Now, obviously, when you have guys like Okada and you have guys like Tanahashi and Suzuki who have been around for as long as they have, could be a very competitive block. But at the end of the day, if I had to pick, and I'd love to have Silky here to offer his picks as well, I'm going to go with Hangman Page. I'm going to go with Switchblade Jay White coming out of Block A at the G1 Climax. I think Jay White's doing a good job. Hopefully I haven't been referring to him as Hangman Page this whole time because I just realized I did it there, and hopefully I haven't been doing it all this time as well. But I think Jay White's been spectacular as the U.S. champion. I think Jay White will do an excellent job in the G1, and if I had to pick someone to come out of the A block, Jay White is going to be my guy out of Block A for this year's G1 Climax. Now let's take a look at Block B, and this is the one that has really got people excited. You've got newly crowned United States Heavyweight Champion Juice Robinson. You've got Hiroki Goto, Tomohiro Ishii, Toru Yano, who's always good for a couple of laughs, your IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kenny Omega, as well as his Golden Lovers tag team partner Kota Ibushi. You've got Tama Tonga, Tetsuya Naito, Sonata, and this year's New Japan Cup winner, Zack Sabre Jr. For those of you who are not big followers of New Japan, that is a stacked block. So much talent in that block, not only among the current title holders of New Japan belts, IWGP belts, but some of the greats of all time in there as well. Now, obviously, Juice Robinson is a guy who's going to get a lot of attention, having just won the U.S. Championship. Tetsuya Naito, as we know, had the loss to Chris Jericho earlier this year, where he lost the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. And, of course, was in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom earlier this year, where he came up short to Kazuchika Okada in that match. And a guy that a lot of people are talking about, maybe more than anybody else in New Japan right now, is Tama Tonga. And again, for those of you who did not catch the G1 special in San Francisco, Tama Tonga making things even more difficult on the Bullet Club by turning his back, along with Tongaloa and King Haku, who made a return to that show, on the remainder of the Bullet Club. Jumped the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Cody, just beat down everybody, and basically said the OG Bullet Club is taking over, Tama Tonga being one of the original members of the Bullet Club, obviously. It was a huge moment for him. It was a huge moment for the Bullet Club in particular, because obviously we've had the feud between Cody and Kenny Omega going on. Now you throw Tama Tonga into the mix, and it makes things even more compelling. So again, going back to that B block, I think the Tama Tonga match against Kenny Omega is one that a lot of people are really going to be looking forward to. This could very well be your next IWGP Heavyweight Championship match, those two guys going at it. So you might get a preview of it here at the G1 Climax. We've certainly seen that happen in the past with Kenny Omega and Okada going at it last year, where Omega actually picked up a victory against him there. And you've got to look at the Kenny Omega versus Kota Ibushi matchup, as those two are tag team partners in the Golden Lovers tag team. Those two having a match against each other is going to be outstanding as well. I think one of the guys you have to look at as a sleeper out of the B block, and I say a sleeper only because, again, he's not a current title holder as far as one of the big singles belts over there in New Japan, but he's held titles all over the world, including in New Japan, is Zack Sabre Jr., guy that won the New Japan Cup earlier this year. And for those of you who did not follow that tournament, he beat 3 former New Japan Cup winners on his way to winning the New Japan Cup. He beat Tetsuya Naito in the first round, beat Kota Ibushi in the second round, and then eventually beat Hiroshi Tanahashi in the final. So 3 former winners of that cup were defeated by Zack Sabre Jr. en route to his win in the New Japan Cup this year. So that's going to be a guy that you have to look at and you have to say he has a legitimate shot. I think a lot of people, including us, looked at Zack Sabre Jr.'s draw in the New Japan Cup and said, holy shit, that guy really got a shit draw, and there's no way in hell that he's actually going to come out of this thing in one piece. Fact of the matter is, he went out there and he killed it. And he surprised everybody, and he came out as the New Japan Cup winner. I wouldn't put it past him to come out of the B block here, although I still think with the amount of star power that's in the B block, he's probably not going to make that happen. Now, another guy you have to look at, of course, is Kota Ibushi. This guy has been a superstar for a long, long time. Been an outstanding wrestler, not only as a tag team with Kenny Omega recently and in the past when the Golden Lovers were together. Those of you stateside who don't follow New Japan Pro Wrestling might remember Kota Ibushi from the Cruiserweight Classic a few years back on the WWE Network, making it all the way to the semifinals before finally losing there. Kota Ibushi impressed a lot of people. So he's another guy. Again, I mentioned a former New Japan Cup winner. He's done very well in the G1s in the past. He's one of the best singles wrestlers over there in New Japan. So Kota Ibushi would be another guy that you look at as the favorite. But if you're going to pick a favorite out of the B block, it has to be Kenny Omega. And the reason I say that, I'm not looking at this from a booking perspective, but when you have your IWGP Heavyweight Champion in the block, he has to be the favorite. It's as simple as that. He's reached the pinnacle of that promotion. He is the guy, and he knocked off who used to be the guy, Kazuchika Okada. They went at it 4 times. First 3 matches, they were 1-1-1, a win, a loss, and a draw. 2 out of 3 falls match, Kenny Omega came out on top in an absolutely spectacular fashion to win the IWGP Heavyweight Championship for the first time. Look, the fact of the matter is there is no better wrestler in New Japan right now than the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, and it's Kenny Omega right now. Kenny Omega's got to be the favorite. Now, when you're looking at it from a booking perspective, and this is one of the things that Silky and I talk about that seems a bit odd about New Japan, if you win the G1 Climax, nowadays you have a choice. You get to pick a title match that you would like to book against one of the title holders in New Japan. It can either be the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, it can be the IWGP Intercontinental Champion, or it can be the Never Openweight Champion. Now, if Kenny Omega were to win the G1, obviously, he's not going to book a match against himself. So it seems kind of odd to have him in the tournament in the first place. And this has happened in the past when we've seen Okada in there while he was holding the belt. It's just been one of those things. But in that regard, it seems like that knocks Kenny Omega down a peg as far as a guy who would be a favorite to win the tournament, since he's already the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Now, you could make the argument that maybe he goes through and wins the G1 and challenges Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental Championship to unify those 2 belts, and they have a rematch of their Wrestle Kingdom match, their no DQ match at Wrestle Kingdom, which was very well received. Again, I don't particularly see that happening myself, but it's something that could happen. And I really don't see Omega going to challenge for the Never Openweight Championship. Now, before anyone asks, and I'm sure someone will correct me if this is not true, but as far as I know, there's only been one time where someone has chosen not to go for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship. And if I'm not mistaken, it was Shinsuke Okada who actually challenged for the Intercontinental Championship. But someone will, like I said, somebody will let me know if I'm wrong on that one. You got to figure that whoever's going to win this thing is going to want to challenge for the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, which is why my pick out of the B block is Tama Tonga. It makes sense. It makes sense from a story perspective for Tama Tonga to just wreck shop, to completely roll over the competition, including Kenny Omega, in the G1, and position himself to not only knock Kenny Omega off his perch as the leader of the Bullet Club, but to knock Kenny Omega off his perch as the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. I think that's a great build to a match between those two. I think it gives Tama Tonga even more credibility as a worthy challenger, although I don't think there are a lot of people who are questioning Tama Tonga's credibility right now. Not after the way they laid out the Bullet Club at the G1 special. And let's face it, Tama Tonga's a badass. He looks like a badass. He carries himself like a badass. And I don't think there's anybody who would look at Tama Tonga and just say there's no way in hell that he beats Kenny Omega. Now, maybe you say maybe he doesn't beat him this early in his title reign, but I could definitely see it happening. I think that would be a great match. I'm taking Tama Tonga out of the B block. Now, Silky made an interesting point in that probably two of the more popular heels right now would be Switchblade Jay White and Tama Tonga. So to have both of those guys come out of their respective blocks and meet in the final means one of them has to lose, and you don't necessarily want them to lose on a big stage like that and kind of mess up their runs, because they're on very good runs as heels at this particular point in time. I still think, based on momentum, based on what guys have done recently, based on the fact that both of those two are spectacular wrestlers and at the tops of their games, I could see those two coming out of their respective blocks and meeting in the final. Now, I think one of them probably won't, but considering that Silky and I have been pretty terrible at picking these types of things in the past, I'm going to stick with a heel from each block, because I fully expect that one of them will lose and I'll be wrong. But, maybe I get it 50-50, and I can take some solace in that. So my picks coming out of the A block, I'm going to go with Switchblade Jay White. Just to review for those of you here at home, there is a look at the A block and the competitors in there. Obviously, Okada is going to be very strong. Tanahashi getting up there in age, but will always be very strong. Hangman Page has had a nice run. Minoru Suzuki is always a wild card. But I'm sticking with Switchblade Jay White out of the A block. And moving on to the B block, a lot of tough competitors over here. IWGP US Champion Juice Robinson, Kota Ibushi, the New Japan Cup winner Zack Sabre Jr., former Intercontinental Champion and IWGP Heavyweight Champion Tetsuya Naito, current IWGP Heavyweight Champion Kenny Omega. But again, at the end of the day, I'm going to take Tama Tonga coming out of the B block and defeating Switchblade Jay White in the final to win this year's G1 Climax. I'm sure there are plenty who disagree, but if you do, feel free to leave us a comment down below. I will look forward to reading everyone's comments. Brooke, I'm glad to see that Zach is friends with Finn Balor. Something tells me that if somebody was friends with Finn Balor, you would know about it, being the big Finn Balor fan that you are. I hope you had a great birthday week as well. And I hope all of you have a great weekend of wrestling, because there's a lot of great wrestling going on this weekend, a lot of good stuff happening. So we will look forward to seeing you back here on Monday night, following Monday Night Raw. It's about 10:15 Central Time, right here on the Speez and the Benchmark Show. For my co-host, the Benchmark Silky Baines, this is Chris Spizak. I thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Monday night. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will talk to you very soon.